You know, when I was a kid, we had a cousin there was 4 boys and 1 girl. I was the girl. And so there was one cousin who moved away, and he came back to visit, and he was kind of prissy. And we were all probably 9 or 10. And at my house, we had 10 acres, and it was a little, I don't know, it was a little ranch farm thing. I mean, we had pigs and cows and goats and all that, and we had a little garden. So I don't know what we were. We were just country people that had 10 acres. But there was an open sewer in the back. I don't know why that was. Maybe it blew up and we never fixed it. But my mom and dad would take people in, and when they did, it meant that we got bumped somewhere else. So the horses went out in the corral, and my dad put sheetrock up in the barn, and the girls lived in there, and the chickens went somewhere else, and my dad put sheetrock up and old junkyard windows, and the boys lived in the old chicken coop. So that was how I grew up. I didn't know about wall-to-wall carpeting or central air till I married my lovely king. I was introduced to the better things of life. So I came up that way. But we either had a lot or we had nothing. But I never knew that I never knew if we were poor. It never hit me like that, because when there was money, my dad would take all 7 of us kids and say, everybody get a shopping cart, fill it up with whatever you want. And we would, and that would happen like once a year, when he'd get some big thing happen. Well, maybe that's why I'm just this all or nothing person. But my cousin came, Davy, and he was the one that kind of became prissy. He came over. You don't come to my house when we're little with a bow tie. It's not gonna work out for you in 1968 with a bow tie, So he did, and me and my other cousins decided, we're going to get that bow tie off of him, So there was this open sewer, and it was covered with these weird flowers that actually, they, of course, smelled poorly, but they looked good. And it was all fluffy and green, and then there was this little handmade bridge to go over this river of sewer. That you had to know that was a sewer, or, maybe if you weren't careful, it was bad. So, now, I enjoyed the thing that we did, but I didn't instigate the death part of it, the death trap part. But, when you hang out with boy cousins, you develop a certain part of your personality that perhaps you wouldn't have developed before. So we took a couple of it was funny. We took a couple of the boards and broke them and kind of loosely put them back together, And we were on the other side, come on, Davy, come on. So he goes running over with his bow tie. He kept telling us we're dumb country people and we're this and we're that. And we're like, yeah, we'll show you how dumb we are, dummy. So coming around here doing like that. Is the kind of guy, well, I can't eat a hamburger without a bun. I never saw a hamburger bun, ever, until I married Mr. Prissy. Then I got introduced to hamburger buns. And yeah, it was Wonder Bread, and you're lucky to get that. And it was usually stale from the Langendorf store, So, well, I can't, without chips. Chips are too expensive. You don't get chips. And then he wanted ketchup. Ketchup? We don't get ketchup, So he had all these parameters, so we thought we're going to do him in. So he goes over this thing. Now, look, my point that I'm making. It's spiritual now. Sort of. It looked good, but it was very bad. It was the worst experience probably of his year. And for a really long time, it was the worst experience of his life. He used to have nightmares later in life when he's like 18, and he always, because they lived in Chicago, I don't know what happened there, but he had a knife under his mattress. And he'd have nightmares. He'd get the knife out and he'd stab his bed. And so I thought later, well, maybe, I told my other cousins, maybe, that's from what we did. They're like, no, that bow tie, that's what that was all about. I'm like, all right. So poor Davy, little Davy, and we were all big, and he was little, and precious, for his age, and we were like from the Amazon, and he goes trouncing across this bridge, and boom, it busted, and down he went into the sewer, man. He went all the way down into the sewer. Sewer. Sad sewer. And he came up, and he was covered in sewer. It has been 50 years, and man, that is still funny. So, I'm gonna get you. And he's like, ew, ew, and he's closing his mouth, and he starts screaming at my mom. Well, you'd have to know my mom to understand she is not getting in the middle of anybody's argument. She will start it and she will end it, but she does not live in the middle of that. So Davy ends up in the sewer, and I've often thought of that, of how good the sewer looked, because it didn't look like a sewer. And life is like that. You don't realize how bad it is until you fall in it, and then you're covered with it. But we get lots of hints. You could slow down and really look at that fake bridge and know it's a design. It's a trap from your other mean cousins, prissy bow tie guy. It's a trap. We could look at it and maybe discover that. We could smell. We could inquire. We could be about. And in our lives, sin is like that. It doesn't come and say, usually, I'm sin. By the time you're in it, you are not managing all the elements of the error, usually. When he was in the sewer, I can guarantee you he was not trying to figure out what piece of whose what was on him. He just wanted out. You see one of those movies where they escape from prison and they have to go through a sewer? And how many have said, I would stay in prison? I'd find another way to get out. And I have that. I'm like, I'd find another way to get out. So why I helped push him in the sewer, I don't know, except that he was annoying. But anyway. So in our lives, when we look at these things, you're supposed to look at it before you get into it. And then guess what? You're never in it. You never have to get in it. Because getting out of it is a little harder. It smells bad, and it's not a good thing. Now, sanctification makes you awesome. If you're sanctified, you're awesome. If you're not awesome, you're not sanctified. Well, getting saved is good. Getting sanctified is better. Getting sanctified means I'm going to work at doing something right with my life. I'm going to stay out of the sewer. That's what that means. I'm just stay out of the sewer. And then everything gets easier. And I'm going to go on a really long, wide corner in a very terrifying, slow boat to make a point. All right? Are you with me? And you have the sewer story to keep you company. So hang on to that. I want to tell you some statistics about something that you probably don't care about, but I found interesting. While the cost of living, drug addiction, and seemingly generally bad behavior in the world has increased since 1937. And I would think that you'd agree with that. Things have kind of gotten worse since 1937. If you skip the Depression and you skip the Godfather or whoever that murder guy was, there's things you can have to skip to figure it all out for real. But the truth is, I think overall, morally, things have gotten a little rougher. And in life, they're just more hazardous. So I want to tell you something that has decreased until the last couple years. On May 30th, 1896, now we're going. Are you ready? We're going on a journey. The motorist by the name of Henry Wells hit a bicyclist It's unimportant but slightly interesting. Her name was Evelyn Thomas. Now, this happened on a New York City street. In 1896, it was not a fatality, but it was America's first auto accident, so it's notable. But nothing really happened because, nobody died. It was just an accident. But when Henry Bliss stepped off a streetcar in New York 3 years later, in 1899, a car hit him, and he died. Thus began our terrible and horrible need and our fascination with the road. Now, it seems bizarre all by itself since cars only traveled between 10 and 20 miles per hour, some getting to 30, but not very many in that day. And after that, the automobile industry required that there be what's called pedestrian catchers mounted on the front of the cars for any more cars that were made from 1900 on, and I'm glad they stopped requiring that, and they did. They were put on the front of the car, they were made out of metal, and they were supposed to be something for the pedestrian to jump into or grab onto so they didn't get plowed down by the car. I guess that's where bumpers came from. Now, I do not know how many lives those devices saved, if any. But in 1899, 90% of the cars were electric. They weren't gas cars, they were electric. But then 15 years later, Henry Ford would create a gasoline-driven car for 2/3 less the money. So he could sell you a car for $500, but an electric car was around $1,500. So I digress. Anyway, so here comes the gas car. Now here's the statistics I want you to listen to, and I want you to just to try to see this with me. In 1930, there were 7 million auto accidents. 40 years later, 1970, there are 16 million auto accidents. So America decided upon a campaign in the 70s for safety, for safe driving in the 70s, because accidents were out of control. So during the campaign of driver safety, 25 years later, it goes from 16 million down to 6, which is less than it was in 1930. Less car accidents. In 1995, there were only 6 million. Then something happened. It went from 6 million in 20 years to 16 million, back where it was in 1970. 16 million accidents. So in 20 years, the accident rate rolled back 45 years. I'm telling you this, we're going to go somewhere this morning. I'm telling you this because there's reasons for failure. When something stops working, there's a reason for it. Either you're supposed to do something different or you're not pressing in the right way to what you're doing. You're supposed to do it different, perhaps. That's an indicator. When God starts talking to you, usually something needs to happen. So 45 years later, we have 16 million. They say, according to the United States National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, there are 6 main causes for the increase in these accidents. And this statistic was from them from 2015. You don't have to write these down, but I want you to understand the reasons. Okay, number one reason that the accidents have risen from 6 million to 16 million in 20 years. Number one reason, distraction. And the number one reason within that reason is cell phones. Number 2, unsafe. The number one reason, and that reason is the need to take risks. And that goes across every category, the need to take risks. Number 3 is alcohol. Number 4 is I'm tired and I shouldn't drive. Number 5 is speeding. Number 6 is angry. Yeah, that's a thing now. I'm angry, so I'm going to cause a wreck. Being angry. Extraordinary challenges usually allow for extraordinary accomplishments. So whatever you're facing, The Lord's allowed you a challenge so you could have an extraordinary accomplishment. Do we agree on that? We agree. Okay. Turn to the book of Ruth. So now we are seeing a campaign. You've seen it. You've noticed it. Don't text and drive. We're seeing a campaign of instruction to do away with the evils that have happened since 1970 when you're in your car. When we go from 16 million errors down to 6 because you're getting something right and then you lose it all again, got to ask yourself what you do then. So now they're doing what they did before. They're educating. And in our lives, can you think back on a time when it was a little better? Can you think back on a time when it was a little different and maybe there were hopes, maybe they got dashed, but you got to be able to think back on that and examine that. Did you walk past a sewer and fall in and just not even, how could you not notice? Maybe you didn't notice. And you need to look at those things because we're people of free will. And when you ask people to help you or pray for you or bless you and they're not right with God, all the garbage that's in them, you just gave it permission to go into you. And sometimes it's as simple and it's as easy as that. You have to be true to the way that God made you. Otherwise, you get stuck in 1970, which, you know, I was there. It wasn't that good. I want to give you a quote from a man that wrote something really, really neat. And I gleaned this part from it. His name is Max Debess. And he said, God only has wounded, sinful idolaters to work with. It's all he has. And what's amazing and humbling is this. He chose that. He made us, and he didn't make us perfect. He got one perfect son whose faithfulness becomes ours by grace. I love that. In here, we are working hard, plowing a road to revival, and that's why sometimes it's difficult. You teenagers, you early 20 guys, whatever your hip name is, I don't know. You know, you could have gone an easier way, but your parents came and trapped you in here. You kids that are not in the ark and you're trapped in here. Someday it's going to be a great story for you because you're going to know that you were taught how to persevere in the name of the Lord, and it is going to be a good thing. Until we learn to not wrestle with the rocks along our road, we wrestle with the rocks on our road. So we have to move along, and sometimes for something to happen, something has to happen. So remember that. The book of Ruth, I want to read chapter 1 to you. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. And the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife was Naomi. And the name of his 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. And they came into the country of Moab, and they continued there. And Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. And they took them wives of the women of Moab. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth. And they dwelled there about 10 years. And Mahlon and Chilion died also, both of them. And the woman was left of her sons and her husband. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law that she might return from the country of Moab. For she had heard in the country of Moab how that the Lord had visited his people in giving them bread. Wherefore she went forth out of the place where she was, and her 2 daughters-in-law with her. And they went on the way to return unto the land of Judah. And Naomi said unto her 2 daughters-in-law, Go, return each to her mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you, as ye have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant you that ye may find rest, each of you, in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voice, and they wept. And they said unto her, surely we will return with thee unto thy people. And Naomi said, turn again, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Are there yet any more sons in my womb that they may be your husbands? Turn again, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say, I hope, and if I should have a husband also, even tonight, and would bear sons, would ye tarry for them till they were grown? Would you stay for them from having husbands? Nay, my daughters, for it grieveth me much for your sakes that the hand of the Lord is gone out against me. They lifted up their voice, and they wept again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law. But Ruth clave unto her. And she said, behold, thy sister-in-law is gone back unto her people, and unto her gods. Return thou after thy sister-in-law. And Ruth said, entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Where thou diest will I die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me. When she saw that she was steadfastly minded to go with her, then she left speaking unto her. Verse 19, so they two went until they came to Bethlehem. And it came to pass, when they were come to Bethlehem, that all the city was moved about them. And they said, is this Naomi? And she said unto them, call me not Naomi, call me Mara. For the Almighty hath dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, and the Lord hath brought me home again empty. Why then call me Naomi, seeing the Lord hath testified against me, and the Almighty hath afflicted me? So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, with her, which returned out of the country of Moab. And they came to Bethlehem in the beginning of barley harvest. It is the book of Ruth, but we're not going to concentrate on Ruth. We're going to concentrate on Naomi, who appears to be a bit of an emotional rehab. She could, hang in with Job, I would think, at this point, She's very sad and very upset. Naomi is these things. She's sad. She's disappointed. She's angry. She's lonely. And she says herself, I am bitter. And she's probably a pack of other negative things. So we know these things about her. She's sad, disappointed, angry, lonely, and she is bitter. So why does she leave Moab, where she's been staying for 10 or 15, maybe even 20 years she's been there? She went with her husband. He dies. Her sons marry. They die. In the first place, if you look at a map, you will see that Jerusalem, Bethlehem, is way up here. And Moab is over here. Now, her husband, there's a famine in the land. Why not go to one of these other places? Maybe even further down. And there were godly places he could have gone, but he didn't. He chose Moab. I'm going to tell you why he chose Moab, because it was easy. He chose Moab because it was easy. It was further away, but it was easier. The Moabites did not love God. He deliberately signed himself up for ungodly things. A conversation earlier with somebody that was grieving over the fact that they, their family isn't, connected, and they were wondering about things. And I said, well, the church is not above the family. Family is above the church. It's God, family, and the church is under that. But if you have family members that are wrong, and they're pushing you all the time to do wicked things, and they are evil, the Bible says walk away. You have to walk away, because they're going to grab you, and they're going to take you to a place they're going to take you to the sewer with pretty flowers where you don't want to go. They're going to stick you in 1970 with a bad auto statistic and put you in a bad vehicle. They're taking you there, and you yourself and me myself will be blamed for it, because no lines were drawn. And we're the ones that have to draw the line. We have to prefer the Lord that much. So they're in Moab. Now, we ask ourselves, why would she go from Moab? There has to be a reason. Her life now is here. She's evidently a little disappointed, if not completely mad at God. But something happens in verse 6. I want you to look at it. She has made it very clear that she's upset, she's negative, she's mad. Why would she go to receive deliverance and redemption and favor and blessing from the God that she doesn't even like? She has made it very clear that she does not approve of God and that she's blaming God, and she's owning her bitterness. Usually a bitter person, you have to get them, sneak up on them. And almost when they're not looking and say, give them the revelation, hey, you're bitter. And they go, what? But to walk around saying, yes, I am bitter. I never met somebody like that. At least not that they're going to admit it. But advertising their bitterness is strange to me. In verse 6, Scripture says that when she heard that the Lord was visiting his people and giving bread, that's when she had to be there. She had to go. She's still an emotional train wreck, but she ran into the truth. And sometimes God, he doesn't deal with us according to our sin. And the word says this, but he deals with us according to his own ability to give mercy, which is great and good.